Hi guys, this is the second in our four-part series on negotiating with your spouse, and our focus today is on preparation. I believe that begins with a plan, and I'd like for you to write it down. I'd like for you to write down what it is that you must have. What are those have-tos that you must emerge with if you're going to call this negotiation successful? Then follow up with those things that you'd like to have if you could. They're not absolutely essential, but you'd like to have them if you could. Then I want you to flip that around and look at it from your spouse's point of view. What is it that your spouse must have? And then what are those things that your spouse would like to have if he or she could have their way? Now, when you have all of that written down, then it's easier to come up with the sequence to use to guide your spouse gently to yes on the issues that matter. Once you've done that, I'd like for you to have your buddy or your friend look that over, see if they have anything they want to share with you about how you can look at it differently or challenge you with questions or whatever. So now you have your plan. It's time for a rehearsal. I'd like for you to have your buddy play your spouse, armed with whatever information you can provide to your buddy about what to expect. But once you have an adversary, and I hate to use the term, but they really are, you are talking about a negotiation, and their interests are a little different from yours, so it's okay, I think, for us to use the term adversary. Lay out that sequence that you worked out, and as you do it, practice keeping your cool. There are going to be some things that your spouse may do that sort of push your buttons, and if you know what those are and can prime your buddy so that your buddy kind of presses those buttons, you practice keeping your cool even though those things are coming up. Also, practice giving positive feedback to your spouse. Neither of you is going to be very accustomed to that. So if you're doing that, I'm not saying you're complimenting your spouse on how good he or she looks or how good he or she smells. This is about their being a good parent or a good spouse or a good thoughtful person who has done a good job laying the groundwork for what the two of you have to do to get through this. You're complimenting them on those kinds of things. And in the process, I want you to practice finding common ground. Say, oh, now that's something on which we agree. Our interests are completely aligned here. You and I, we want the very same thing. That's something that you and your spouse may not be accustomed to looking for these days. But if you are on the lookout for it with your buddy's help, then when you do that in negotiation, it may change the tenor and help the negotiation be much more productive for both of you. Then when you've finished, I want you to stop and get your buddy to critique you. How did I do? What did you think of the way I handled this? How would you suggest that I approach it when my spouse does this or says this or says that? Then after you've done that, go back and do it again. Rehearsal's cheap. Play it over. And if it takes 3 or 4 or 5 times, great. Go ahead and do those rehearsals over and over so that you develop the confidence you need to head into a negotiating session with your spouse. Now, with that confidence, I think you're ready to set up the session with your spouse. I suggest you call for a neutral site. Not your place, not your spouse's place, a park, a McDonald's, some kind of common area that neither of you feels like is home territory for the other. Relatively free from distractions. We don't want things that are going to keep the two of you from focusing on the issues at hand. I'd like for you to be well rested, and I'd like for your spouse to be well rested as well. It won't do you a lot of good if you're well rested and your spouse is short-tempered and exhausted where they pop off on something that doesn't matter. So I'd like for you to find a time when both of you can be well rested. Don't want your children anywhere nearby. Your children don't need to be part of this. So make sure that they're well out of the way. I'm a big believer in announcing the purpose of the meeting. I do not like to have you use the term negotiation. I can't explain it exactly, but something about the term negotiation makes people feel like there's going to be a win-lose, and that's not the case at all. So rather than say, I'd like for us to set up a time when we can negotiate, I suggest you say, I'd like for us to set up a time when we can get together and work through the issues of our divorce. That way, the two of you know that's what you're going to be talking about, and you'll come prepared with the data you need and with the questions that you need to answer so that the two of you can have an effective session. So that's the preparation. Hang on for next time so we talk about the session itself.